always.
Never ending.
There's some new fangled format that I was on today, and I was muted, but I hadn't done it, and I couldn't get across to anybody. and finally, the host, after like 10 minutes, goes, "Oh, I accidentally muted you," and I'm like, because I was like, "What am I doing wrong?"
Even criminal courts mostly, it's always been in person, and so now they've tried to do some of this going through the internet. It's been really difficult.
Impossible.
Really difficult.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way to cross-examine someone over Zoom, is there? Or is there?
No, I think that most of the defense attorneys have objected to any type of internet type of court. So even jury selection, they don't want to do that. So I don't think it's going to happen. And in most of my cases are life cases, and no one's really is willing to take the risk on those type of cases to start doing weird type of court procedures that I think people are just uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy.
It may be a while. I think they're trying to do jury trials, but I don't know if any major cases will happen during COVID. I think they're going to have to come up with either a vaccine. There's going to have to be something that they have to do to.
Yeah, I keep telling everybody we're all waiting for the 2 VACs, vaccine and vacation.
Right.
And you got to have the one to do the other.
Exactly.
Are we, Simone, are we waiting for Brian?
Yeah, Jill just texted him, so.
Oh, hey, Jill.
He'll be popping on. Eric, I think you might be muted right after that muting story.
All right, I think now I'm unmuted. Hi. I was trying to say, Justin, before Brian gets here, I was going to ask maybe if I could have you adjust the way that your laptop, are you using a laptop?
Yes.
Is sitting, maybe, I don't know if you have some big fat law books that maybe you could bring it up.
Yeah, I don't, I could turn this around. Let's see. So here is this part, and then I have a lot of boxes. So most prosecutors have boxes.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not that I need them in the background. I was actually just going to suggest that you would raise it up. So
okay. Wait, yeah, I could definitely do that.
So it's looking nicely into your eye line.
Yeah.
I don't have it perfect in my setup either here. So to demonstrate, I'm just like,
Let me see what I can do. Let's see. That's funny. I thought you wanted a background of books.
No, your background is fine.
Is that better, or want it higher, or you tell me?
Can we do one more?
Yeah.
Let's go higher.
Let's see this one.
I'd love to get you into as much of the frame as possible. Because when people look like this, it's like you're small in the action. There we go.
Is that better?
Better. Do you even have one more?
Yeah, I could. You want me more like, yeah, I could probably find it. Yeah, I have a lot of books in here, so.
I believe you.
It's interesting because, everything's on the internet now, so you don't really use books as much, but I'm kind of old school. I like the books.
I do too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Even when I'm in trial, I like like a folder with it's just better for me.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Can you tilt the computer like down a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah. And then as you slide in, great. And then my one other question is, one side of your face is appearing darker than the other side?
It could be let me lower the shades a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Is that a little bit better?
It's a little more even, yeah. You're more light if it's available would be nice, but
Oh,
this,
you want
yeah.
more light? I can make it lighter.
Is it going to be through opening those?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because then it's going to give you I don't want to, especially as a prosecutor, I don't want you getting that two-face look.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So it's always hot out here. So it's always sunny. It's, I mean, every once in a while it's not, but my brother works at Penn State, and he said it was starting to get a little cold by him.
Oh, yeah.
But it's still like, I mean, I don't know, it's probably 90s today, 94, 95. We really only have 2 seasons either, so, but it's still sunny. Like every day it's sunny out here.
Do you even have a winter coat?
That what's funny is I do, because I do go to Pennsylvania and I do go to the East Coast. I was born in New York, so I do have it for that.
Yeah.
And I like to snowboard, so I do have some things, but I have much more like shorts and tank tops and stuff like that. I don't really have a lot of winter stuff.
How's the air quality now? Is it gotten better?
It's not good because of the fires.
Yeah.
So I think the wind helps get rid of the smoke, but then the wind hurts because of the fires.
Right.
So it's not really good. Hopefully the fires can kind of clear up, but no, it hasn't been good. Yeah, we always have something going on out here. And then by our office, we, not only is it smoky, but we have a lot of protesters now too. They protest pretty much everything. Like, people don't realize LA, downtown, anything, they're down here protesting. So sometimes you got to leave early because they block the freeways. That's everything. They start blocking freeways now.
Right.
Which doesn't make much sense to me, because most people use the freeways are workers. We're just trying to get home, but they do that too.
Well, and they're always full.
Yes, they're always full.
Yeah.
It's been kind of nice during the pandemic because there hasn't been as much traffic. It's starting to get back again, but it hasn't been as bad.
Oh yeah, it's same with Philly. I mean, for a while there, we're all living in la la land, like, oh wow, maybe this is permanent, and then no. It's going to be worse because nobody wants to be on mass transit.
I know.
So can't wait for that.
Right. No, it's hard. I think that it's definitely, I don't think we've never experienced something like this. So it's
not in our lifetimes.
Right. With the pandemic, and then you include all the political things that are going on.
Well, the pandemic means we can pay more attention to the news, and the news is so traumatizing. It's just like, it's like being held. I know.
And then even there's so many kids who, they can't go to school, at least in LA. They try to say, okay, children who have disabilities or children who have individual educational plans, we're going to open it for them. And then the teacher said no.
Yeah.
So you can't, and for me, it's just disappointing because there's many kids, most of the kids get food from school. Usually their nutrition's from school. Most of child abuse reports are from school. So it's hard. We don't know what's going on. I do know this. So we had to add 2 more people to our unit because there's a lot more child deaths out here.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it's definitely, and there's a lot more domestic violence. Domestic violence is really on an uptick because you force people to stay at home, and then they're drinking alcohol, and then you do have problems with that.
Yeah. Hi, Brian. It's very nice to meet you. I'm Marci.
Really apologize. I'm late. I'm sorry, guys.
Don't worry. I was late too. So.
Yeah.
When COVID hit, Child USA immediately pivoted to all virtual all the time. We were blessed with a grant to let us do that. But, we started this What About the Children series, WATCH, because nobody was talking about children. And you knew that kids alone were at risk and kids in abusive homes were at risk. So those statistics are sad and I'm sure right. But well, I know you're both extremely busy and I want to thank you for the time you've got to spend with us to do a podcast on your truly inspiring series. I gotta hand it to both of you for it's really one of the most affecting series I've ever seen. And I work on children's issues all the time. So the Trials of Gabriel Fernandez. So we will be separately. I'll do the introduction, so you don't have to listen to it, and we'll jump right in if that's okay.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
So let me just start out by saying, Jonathan, how did this case come into your universe? So I take it that you were a prosecutor at the time, as you are now, and somehow got involved in this case.
So I was a younger prosecutor in the Antelope Valley, but I was the most experienced in child abuse and sexual abuse type cases. So we had a lot of young DAs in the Antelope Valley branch office, but I was one of the younger ones, but who had the most experience. I had mostly done a lot of sexual abuse cases. I just started moving into more physical abuse type cases. And I was in the middle of a trial. We're about ready to finish up a trial when the Gabriel case started. And so it was about 3 weeks into the case, I finished my trial. And I think the office and everybody knew the case was going to be a really, really big and complicated case. And so they assigned me the case about 3 weeks in. And that's sort of how I got it. Just being in the Antelope Valley branch, doing so many felony trials, doing a lot of cases with children, and they assigned me the case.
So I don't want to give away the whole series because I think the whole world should watch it to understand. But, you know, the bottom line was that every single adult in this child's life failed him tragically.
You're right.
And how hard was it to get the pieces of the case to come together? Because what was it, multiple government agencies and of course the parents and the larger family, that must have really been a challenge.
It was very challenging. I was basically inexperienced when it came to these large DCFS or CPS records type cases. Also all these different agencies having all these different records, and we needed them to cooperate with the prosecution of the case. And so it was a huge challenge. I think one of the things that helped me is that we did a grand jury. And in California, we mostly do preliminary hearings for felonies. We don't do grand juries, whereas the East Coast, you have a lot more where you use grand juries.
Yeah.
But we do use them sometimes in California on really big cases because it allows us the opportunity to bring in a lot of witnesses and get a lot of information. We also, in California, you have to bring in exculpatory information in a grand jury. East Coast usually doesn't have to do that then, but we do. And so I did a grand jury, a pretty extensive grand jury on the Gabriel case, and it did help get all of this information. But it was an incredible challenge because you had a lot of agencies who actually were trying to hide things from me. And that's what becomes challenging is you're the prosecutor and you think people are going to want to help, especially when it comes to a child who was abused and murdered. And it is surprising and shocking how many people cover up things. Especially the government's main role is to protect people and to protect children. That's their I believe it's their number one role. And if they can't do that, we have a problem. And so, yeah, it was a big challenge.
So was it the fact that they were ashamed of what they had done, or they were protective of the system? I mean, I've been involved in cases involving the Catholic Church and Penn State, and almost every type of organization. And the world's kind of broken down into the people, for example, at Penn State, where I actually went to grad school. And I had people coming after me saying, how dare you insult Penn State of all entities? I was threatened by the board, and then I had other people saying, thank you so much for standing up for the victims at Penn State, right? So what was the thinking in the government officials from where you're sitting?
I would say within the big bureaucracies, it's money. They will do anything and everything to protect themselves because they're afraid of civil liability, which is so sad. I mean, the good thing about being a prosecutor is we don't consider money. It just doesn't really come into my wheelhouse, and so I'm just trying to get the evidence and trying to get to the truth. The aspect of money is really not an issue for me, and who's liable or not liable civilly. But I will tell you, governmental agencies, especially within LA County, they will do anything and everything to protect themselves because of civil liability. So, but there also is, I think what you said, I think more within the police department, not only civil liability, but the police officers, they will try to protect themselves also individually, and they will get mad at you, and they will do things to you or try to do things to you to intimidate you, because individually they don't want to be embarrassed or looked at in a bad light. So I would say it's a combination of both, but overall it's money. They don't want to get sued and lose money. But within the police department, definitely you have individuals who do not want to be embarrassed in any way. And they can do a lot of things to you, or try to do a lot of things to you to prevent that from happening and to protect themselves.
So Brian,
That's a really good, actually, intro to me. What you just said.
So first of all, I just want to salute you for making a series about this beautiful little boy who doesn't survive because of the system. I mean, I talk to survivors all the time, and many of them will tell me, I've written my story and I've tried to get a documentary, or I've tried to publish a book, and everybody's telling me nobody wants to hear these stories anymore.
Yeah.
Well, this is extreme. This is quite remarkable of a story, but how did you decide to take it? How did you get people to agree to finance such a story that all of us should know about? It's really amazing.
Yeah, well, I first came in contact with it when the story broke in the LA Times. It was broken by LA Times reporter Garrett Throff, who was also a part of the telling of the story later with us. But that's when I first heard about it. It was a huge story. Obviously, it was a huge story. I think people who aren't in LA don't realize how much this kind of rattled things, and what the response was when this story first broke.
Mm-hmm.
I was interested in it. Congresswoman Karen Bass says in our film that it rattled and shook LA County to its core. So I started paying attention to it. I didn't really think about making a film about it or a series about it until later. But when Garrett Throff talked to me with another producer, the person that we had in common, and at first I wasn't sure. I mean, I had the same questions. Are people going to be engaged in this story? Can we really find out what's happening? And I got drawn into Gabriel's story. And it's not just the extraordinary, just the awful things that happened to Gabriel, the unbelievable number of failures that seem to happen in this young boy's life. But it's also when the social workers were criminally charged that it became something much, much bigger. And that's what we tried to figure out. And you mentioned the secrecy. I mean, the institutions were reacted the way government institutions often do. And that is they just recoil into this kind of secrecy and this instinct towards protection that really becomes toxic.
Completely toxic. I mean, if I had to summarize my theory of all these cases, it's that adults prefer and protect adults.
Mm-hmm.
And kids are just, kids are kids.
Yeah.
So,
and it really seemed like we need to give, this is something that Mr. Hatami said and many times in the courtroom, give Gabriel a voice. And I felt that early on, even before we got into the courtroom. I felt like he deserves a voice. This is what we should be doing as filmmakers. We should be telling the voice of the 8-year-old boy, Gabriel Fernandez, who nobody listened to when he was alive. So it was powerful. And so we actually started filming a little bit. We shot some interviews. And then I went to Netflix and I just said, look, you got to do it. Sometimes you pitch stories to networks and stuff. And you say, oh, this would be interesting. I think it would be great. This one was like, you have to do this story. I mean, you have to. All this stuff is coming out in the courtroom. Has all of these, it just reverberates in all sorts of ways throughout LA County in all sorts of important ways, both in government officials, third-party contractors, things like that. And it somehow the story of this one boy really points at all of these other systemic problems. So we just have to do it.
And they listened.
Yeah, and thankfully they listened to me.
I mean, yay.
Right.
But it is, I mean, there have been, of course, a series on either sex abuse or athletes in abuse. And there's been a lot more attention to these issues, but there hasn't been as much attention to the physical abuse and to the neglect of those like Gabriel. So how did you, and I'd like to hear from both of you on this, how did you decide what to include in the series? Was it the two of you brainstorming over what to include, or what was the process?
Well, we were, to be clear, Mr. Hatami is a source and a character in was actually really an example of, somebody who opened up and really gave us access and to be truthful, I don't think we could have done it or told it as compelling as it turned out if it wasn't for him opening up to us and really kind of being truthful. But we of course we make the final choices. That's sort of just how documentarians are. We don't give a final cut to anybody but ourselves, which is the right thing to do. All sorts of reasons. But the issue of what to include and what not to include was really tricky. I mean, we particularly in the level of abuse that we wanted to show, in discovery and all the stuff we found that came out in the courtroom. As you can imagine, there's a lot of really awful imagery. Mm-hmm. So the question does become, where do you draw the line? You don't want to be too gratuitous there. You don't want it to feel sensational. But at the same time, you don't want to look away either. You don't want to blink and somehow talk about it being bad without actually being real about it. So, it's a big part of the discussions and crafting and editing the series came down to where to draw that line.
I mean, we're all fond of euphemisms to try to deal with these issues because they're so difficult. And I give you a lot of credit for telling the true story with some of the worst edges being shown. I have to say that part of the scene that bothered me the most was the absolute incapacity of the teachers. I mean, he was going to school, and if you're a teacher, that kid is in trouble. And it did seem like the teachers dropped the ball as well as social services. So, I mean, Jonathan, how did you all decide who to charge and who to pay the most attention to in terms of fault?
I think that is it's a good question, and it's a really tough question to ask, especially in this type of case. I would say, one, you have the main individuals, the two people who actually did the actual physicality, which
Right.
were the two defendants, obviously. I think that, and then you have to look at who has a duty, and it really comes down to who has a legal duty, and that's a tough question, especially dealing with certain types of individuals and when the law is not that clear.
Mhm.
And it's not that clear here in California. And so I think our office and me personally do think that the social workers had a legal duty to protect Gabriel, because that is their job. Their sole job is they're assigned to Gabriel. The social worker is assigned to that child, and the social worker works for the government, and their main job is to protect the child. And so obviously they have a duty to that child. I think then you start having to look down the line and see each individual and what their duty is. I think when it came to the school, I would say this: you had a lot of people that seemed to be getting in the way of the teacher, Jennifer Garcia, trying to tell everybody what was happening to Gabriel. The principal hid things that were happening to Gabriel and told Jennifer not to do certain things, not to tell anybody, especially Gabriel came with, haircut, hair missing, a black eye, bruised lip, and the principal seemed to not want to do what he needed to do to protect Gabriel. And then you had, the school nurse, and then you had school administrators, and then you had Jennifer, who every time she would report something, it would get worse for Gabriel. Really
Yeah.
difficult situation. So, but I think you had people within the school. I think you had people within the sheriff's department. I think you had people within the gain office. All these individuals, I do believe, have some culpability, but legally it's hard because of the laws. And it's tough because citizens or people get mad. They're like, we see this and it's horrible. Why aren't you doing anything? And I think that it's a tough challenge because of the laws and who's legally has a duty to protect children. And it's important that we create laws, or we contact our legislators and create laws that actually protect children and impose duties on people that should have those duties. And so it came down to who could we charge based upon the current law. And sometimes that's difficult, and it tells you that we need to fix the laws and change them so they protect children more than they do already.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly something Child USA spends a lot of effort on. It's always kind of amazing that you can set up the system. So the system that was supposed to be helping Gabriel involved mandated reporting from the teacher and the principal. It involved, public service agencies that were supposed to be protecting him. Of course, the parents had a legal duty to their own child. The family had duties, and it's just always amazing how it can all collapse. And so then we have to all go back and figure out, well, what was the hole in the system this time? But speaking of the law, Brian, I've worked, I've done several documentaries, and I've actually done several interviews for shows, which my interview did not make it onto the screen because the entity I was talking about said, I'm going to sue you to death if you people publish this. And speaking the truth is risky. So did you have to have a lot of back and forth with the lawyers at Netflix or in your own office in helping to decide what to show and what not to show? Because I think the public doesn't understand how much the lawyers often drive what is the final result.
Yes, we did talk to lawyers quite a bit, but that's not necessarily new for us. I mean, in our, when you try to speak truth to power, or try to be critical in any way to people who are powerful entities, we live in a society where you're going to open yourself up to those kinds of lawsuits.
Yeah.
We're familiar with that. We've been threatened with that so many times I can't count. But there's beautiful thing about the United States of America is the First Amendment and the fact that the truth itself is a kind of golden protection to that.
Yeah.
That doesn't always mean that you can't be attacked in all sorts of ways, including with like frivolous lawsuits that are meant more to sort of drain your resources than to actually win, which has been a problem for some news organizations. It's a danger. But the truth, we believe in that. We believe that we're very, very careful about the kinds of things that we say and show. I think that's something that really, really gets lost in an environment, especially in the last few years, in which everything is fake news and the media is
Right.
scurrilous media, and we're the enemy of the people. I mean, I just kind of sometimes wish we should just do a documentary on the amount of effort it takes to get the truth right, to get this stuff right. And I mean, there isn't a statement made in the Trials of Gabriel Fernandez or anything that we've done that hasn't been checked multiple times, 3 or 4 times, multiple sources, or is presented as something that's speculation or whatever. We think about everything that's in there. There's nothing frivolous. So we just arm ourselves with that and go forward. There was a couple of things happened in this. Isauro Aguirre's counsel tried to stop the publication of the documentary before we were able to. We were still in the middle of it, pretty early on. So we actually had to go to court to defend that. It was an attempted prior restraint.
Yep.
And it was a little frightening at first, but then pretty soon we realized they had 0 case that we were going to win it. We got a lawyer who was who had argued the most recent case of prior restraint in front of the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court. So they were a little outgunned, but in the end, but
that happens.
But it's absolutely true. But but it goes back to what Jon was saying in the beginning: this kind of secrecy, a kind of instinct to protect. That is toxic, and these things aren't. Nothing really changes until any kind of bad actors, malfeasance, problems, abuse, until this stuff gets dragged out into the cold light of day. It just doesn't change any other way.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's my perspective, but
no, I agree.
And until people know about it and are angry about it, these things get swept under the rug.
Yeah, Brian and his team did a really, really good job, not only in the documentary, but I mean, you see the truth. I mean, the truth is the truth. And sometimes people don't like the truth. And sometimes the truth can be embarrassing. But it's important because the only way to make change is to put these things out there, and for people to have to confront them, for people to have to see all the abuse that Gabriel went through, even though it's uncomfortable, and then say, what are we going to do to fix this? And what are we going to do to change this? But Brian's right. There was a person within the sheriff's department who threatened that he was going to do a press conference and somehow expose something that came out in the documentary. But at the end of the day, at the end of the day, the truth is just the truth. And if you're armed with that, I think anything that anybody brings out, evidence is evidence and facts are facts. And I think that I think overall, Brian and his team did a really, really good job to bring this out. To try to help so many other children who are abused, and to get people to talk about it, to get people to talk about so many children who are being abused, who are in the system, and what are we going to do to fix this as a community? What are we going to do to fix it?
Well, I wondered about I mean, was there any pressure from political sources to not tell the story? I could imagine that there were those, and now you don't have to answer that because I know you're still a prosecutor, but maybe I'll ask Brian that. Was there evidence of political pressure to either slow down the investigation or to suppress your retelling of it?
Yeah, I mean, I should say that that we wanted to talk to DCFS quite a bit in the course of this, and we thought that there was, I think what's probably obvious if you see the series, all sorts of questions we had for them, and what we were going to do is give them a real opportunity to talk about these things. And I think they missed an incredible opportunity to talk about this stuff. Bobby Cagle, the current director, was not the director at the time of Gabriel's death. And he'd been director of DCFS for about a year when we started this, or maybe even not that long. So he had a perfect opportunity to look back and say, well, look, this is what happened then. There was a blue ribbon commission that recommended all of these different changes that we put into the system. This is what we're doing to address that. And I think it could have been a great opportunity, but instead they recoiled and really strung us along for a year or so. We kept asking them, we kept sort of trying to be patient with them. We kept trying to rephrase our approach to them, and we really got the runaround. I would think. I mean, it wasn't just a decline. It was just spinning their wheels, trying to put us through hoops and to actively kind of thwart us. I mean, at first they wanted to know, see a full transcript of the documentary. The Board of Supervisors said the same thing. It's completely outrageous for them to ask for that. They wanted to know what chapters and thesis were for each chapter of the documentary. That's not something that's appropriate for them to ask. So, and obviously we're not going to give that to them. But what we would have given them is an honest chance to, if they said yes to a documentary, you would know their position. You may not agree with it, but you would know how they felt about this more. And I think they missed an opportunity to do that. And I think LA County suffers because of that.
Yeah.
I think the public suffers from not knowing this. I don't think it would have hurt them at all. In fact, I think it would have helped them.
Well, and you really, I love your point about the whole talk about fake news. And there does seem to be a lack of understanding in the public about what documentary makers and even, Los Angeles Times reporters and everybody else in the journalism industry has to go through to verify and then to stick with a story. I mean, you could have easily walked away from this story. It sounds to me like at about 4 or 5 different junctures, because it was turning out to be, there was a lot of opposition to it out there. So, I mean, what do you want the public to understand about the way facts are vetted and why you even stuck with it?
Well, we're obviously in a very strange time when we have a president who routinely attacks the news media because it says things that are inconvenient to him, regardless of whether they're true or not. So this has just become a. I think it's being aggravated by the fact that news industry journalism has lost a lot of its financial underpinnings, mostly because of the internet and social media and all that. It was problematic kind of before Trump. And I think, the fake news is apparently anything that is inconvenient to those people who are powerful, that might fly in the face of something that's not, that has the audacity to question it. But that's really the point of journalism. That's what we should be doing. We should be questioning powerful people. I think this is a moment where it's all changing quite a bit. It's getting very difficult to track disinformation sources, for instance, online. A lot of work I do is online and social media and how information deception sort of happens. And, it's getting very difficult to sort of check stuff and I mean, I think we all know we're a very divided country, and sometimes it comes down to different views of what the facts actually are. And so, you know, it's a very, very difficult time. But you know, I think reputable news sources, I think people who are serious about this, really take it serious and go um, the level of fact checking is pretty significant, at least from our point of view.
So, first of all, I want to thank you both for taking the time to talk to us, but and also letting Child USA honor you, because you really are leaders in a universe where nobody wants to talk about physical abuse or the horrible things he went through. So I'd really love to hear from each of you as we close. What do you hope is the legacy of Gabriel's story? You know, I mean, Jonathan, you were at the trial, you were conducting the trial, and in the justice system, it's not every trial that you are involved in ends up being a docuseries on Netflix. What are your hopes for what this docuseries accomplishes?
Well, I mean, first off, I could tell you that Gabriel and his life and his story changed me. I do believe that it made me a better person, a better dad, and a better prosecutor. And I learned a lot going through um, the case, and you know, the 5 years of having the case before it went to trial. I hope, and I do believe what's happening is Gabriel's story is getting out to so many people, not only in the United States, but all over the world. I get emails from everywhere, from Israel, from France, from Portugal, everywhere. People talking about Gabriel's story, and from that, talking about children and the importance of children, and how children are our future, how children are important, the harm that happens from not only physical abuse, but also emotional abuse, and sexual abuse. I mean, any type of abuse of a child, how it really affects a child. And I think that more people are talking about it. I think if you look back when domestic violence in the 60s and 70s, no one would talk about it. They really wouldn't. And people started talking about it. And then you had the Me Too movement, and then people really started talking about it. And I hope that what Brian and his team have done, and you know what Brian continues to do, and what I continue to do, we start talking about physical abuse of children, even though it is uncomfortable. We start talking about how we as a community can help children. Not only, I also want to say, within the Department of Children and Family Services, there's many children who are lower socioeconomic class, many children of color, who it seems like people just don't care about. But all these children are important. They all are equal in worth, and we all have an obligation to help all children. And so hopefully what Brian's done also uncovers the fact that there's many children who are in the foster care system that people just don't talk about. They just don't care. You know, another child, another African-American child, another Latino child dies, and people just don't care. And so I want them to care. And I think that the series has really tried to help with that, and to show that these are just little boys and little girls, and they deserve to be protected, and they deserve to be loved. And so I do believe Gabriel's legacy is love, that we all need to love one another, especially in this type of environment where we have this pandemic, where we can't, as humans, interact with one another like we normally do, which is healthy. I like people, I like them a lot. And so it's hard for me, and I guarantee you it's hard for children. And so hopefully, I believe Gabriel's legacy is love, that we have to love one another, no matter our differences. no matter where we come from, no matter, you know, where we are in the level of how much money we have. We have to love everybody. That is the most important thing. We have to show empathy for one another, even if we disagree with each other. You know, we have to set that example for our children. We have to really love our children. And I hope Gabriel's story says that. I know that the trial was serious and it was a death penalty case, but I believe that the story isn't about that. The story is about Gabriel and the fact that we do have to love one another. And I hope people see that. And I hope that from that there could be change. I really do. And I believe there is. I believe it's slow, but it is happening. And shows like this and like Child USA is willing to go out there and talk about it, I think is really, really honorable and really, really important. And I appreciate everything you're doing. I thank you. And I thank Brian too. Like Brian said, I didn't have any real part in making the documentary other than just being me, you know, just fighting, you know, and it just, a lot of it was real emotional and I still get emotional about it. So, yeah, I mean, it was emotional. Trials are real life. And I think people have to try to understand that. And so, yeah, I hope that.
I think that's one of the most beautiful statements I've ever heard from a prosecutor. You know, we watch prosecutors on TV in one series after another, and you know, it's courtroom hijinks, and then you go to a bar. Apparently, I think that's the normal modus operandi, they say. So thank you. That's beautiful. And Brian, you've made a lasting artistic contribution to saving children, and I wonder what your hopes are.
Yeah, well, first of all, Jon's being humble. I don't think we could have done it without his openness and his willingness to tell the story and being witness to the fight that he's been engaged in and is still engaged in. You know, being a documentary film, this was a 2.5 year process. And, you know, being a documentary filmmaker, I think in the end, it's just, you're just listening really to other people tell their story and trying to understand what they're saying and trying to understand a complex environment like this and the Byzantine nature of LA County government and all of that. I mean, really what you're doing is you're just listening and you're trying to learn about it. And I think one of the things that really struck me in doing that, and I think both of you probably know this more than me, you've dedicated more of your life to this, but what struck me is we just don't privilege the rights of children. We don't. It even seems weird saying that, but because I didn't really understand that before I did this documentary. We don't see children as having the same rights as adults, and I don't know why it doesn't make any sense to me. And children they have a right to a safe environment, a secure environment. They have a right to safety. They are, as Jon says so eloquently, they are our future. They are so critical, and so I don't understand why we shove this off as though they're not as important. Somehow it doesn't make any sense to me at all. And so that's I know that's general, but it kind of came through a lot of times in the interviews that we were doing. But the other main thing is, and I probably ranted already about this, but the transparency of institutions that are meant to protect us. I mean, these are taxpayer-funded institutions. I think we have a right to know what they're doing. They interact with the public all the time, so they serve the public, and so the transparency, even when things go wrong, I think transparency is the way to make them better. This instinct towards secrecy, towards pulling back, is really, really toxic. I mean, one very small example I'll give you is I did after this I did a short film about the Boy Scouts, abuse in the Boy Scouts. That's just coming out. In fact, I'll post it when it comes into light of day. But I mean, we're talking about decades and decades of abuse that goes back all the way almost to the beginning of the Boy Scouts organization itself. And time again, when this organization that had that stood up as a leader, a real moral leader, when they had a choice to make, they made the wrong choice when it came to this stuff because it would make them look bad. And that just we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of people, thousands of families that were hurt, people suffering in silence. And I think it's the courage of people coming forward, telling their stories, as hard as that is, that brings this stuff out into the light of day, that forces that kind of change in the end. I think it's people, there's the old saying, courage is contagious. And once people kind of know, I mean, I get emotional about this too. It's like once people have the personal courage to come forward against all of these institutions and all of this, these pressure against them, when they're able to do that, other people see their stories and they feel like they're not alone.
Yeah.
And it's the first
Amazing.
step. It's the first step towards making real lasting change.
Well, I want to thank both of you. And this really is, I view this docuseries, The Trial of Gabriel Fernandez, first of all, as a must-see for everybody. But secondly, as it's further evidence we're moving, kids were property for centuries.
Yeah.
And they're becoming persons. And it's the civil rights movement for children right in front of our eyes. And this is a major part of it. So I have to thank you both from the bottom of my heart for what you've done, and for being willing to spend some time today to talk to me. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for everything you're doing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And Erica, did you have any follow-up questions?
Hi, yeah, I'm back. Thank you both so much. I know you couldn't see my emoting responses, but I do just want you to know how affected and important I think what you're doing is, and especially as the mother of a young child. Like, I know I feel this just somehow in a new way. It's just into my bones that we have to somehow do better for all of our kids, so that whatever security it is that I feel like my son has when I tuck him into bed, that's just the universal experience,
Yeah.
Totally agree. Thank you.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And with that, this is sort of housekeeping. We have the bulk of what we're going to use already in what you've recorded with Marci, but now, if you don't mind, what I'll take you just sort of one by one, spotlight you, ask for a name, your name, and for Jon, your title, and just a little bit of backstory about the case that you worked on in a nutshell, and how you came to work with Brian. And we can do all that one by one. And then Brian, I'll essentially do the same thing. This should be old hat. Get your name, get a little bit about your background and how you came to work on this case. And I think also, in particular, how I feel like once you started working with Jon, that really cracked open the story that you were trying to tell. And if there's something in particular to say about that, and how you became tied together in that way in creating this story.
Sure.
Okay. Thanks.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
My name is Jonathan Hatami.
Oh, Jonathan, can you give me just 1 second? I'm getting all of my little, all right. Now I just see you.
Okay. My name is Jonathan Hatami. I'm a deputy district attorney. I work for the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. I currently work as a senior trial attorney for the Complex Child Abuse Unit. I've worked on cases involving children probably for about the last 10 years. I started off working on cases regarding child sexual abuse. and I moved towards child physical abuse. And from 2016 to the present, I've been doing child physical abuse cases. How did I get the Gabriel case? I was the most senior trial attorney for what we call vertical prosecution in the Antelope Valley branch, which is in the high desert, sort of the outskirts of Los Angeles. I currently work in downtown Los Angeles, but at the time I worked in Antelope Valley. And I was the senior trial attorney that did or prosecuted those type of cases, mostly cases involving child victims or children who were witnesses in case. And I ended up getting the case about 3 weeks after it was filed. And I had it for about 5 years until it went to trial. How did I meet Brian? You know, what I can say is that one of the reasons why I opened up to Brian and his team is I really believe that they cared. I'm a very open person anyway, and pretty much what you see is what you get. When I'm in trial, you know, my job is just to put the truth out there, and that's what I do. And I try to put it all out there for everybody to see. But Brian and his team were really caring. I believe they really cared. I believe they really cared about children. And so for me, I believe that it was important to try to talk to them because I thought that in the long run, they could do a really good thing for children. You know, and hopefully what happened to Gabriel doesn't happen to other children. But I think we met in court pretty much. You know, I do a lot of media type cases, but not necessarily cases where there's going to be a big documentary. And so he and his team had their own individual camera. And I think that was sort of a little bit different because mostly in those courtrooms, there's just a pool camera where all the media outlets pool into, but his team was given permission by the court to have their own camera. So I think that sort of intrigued me a little bit about who they were. And then we ended up, I think I ended up meeting his team. Her name was Eve. And from then I met other people on the team, Brian and them. And so I think that, I think one of the reasons why the documentary is so good is just that I really believe that they cared. And I was willing, because it's very difficult as a prosecutor, just to let you know, to open up to the media. Most prosecutors don't like to do that. But I believe that they cared. And I think that that went a long way in me talking to Brian. And but the documentary itself is really Brian and his team. Like I said, I'm just me. They really did a great job. And I commend them for it. And I just did my part, you know, and I tried to be Gabriel's voice. And I think that's important in all my cases. But, you know, I think to tell a jury, you know, what Gabriel went through, it's important to be that child's voice and to be Gabriel's voice and to try to show the jury, you know, really what happened to Gabriel. And I always try to do that in my cases, especially in Gabriel's case, and try to get justice for Gabriel. But that, hopefully that answers the questions you were asking.
It does. I have one more, and again, it's going to feel very similar to so much of what you went through with Marci. I just like to get my own take where I've got you full frame on my camera. Now that the documentary has been made and his story is in the world, and you talked about how you wanted people to take love away from that story and for us to treat each other with love and to treat children as having worth and value and with equity. I was wondering if you could speak again to your hopes as the documentary is in the world and what you want people to go forward and do with that. Like, how can, if someone knows about this and they feel connected or they feel love for a child, what is it that they can do once they have heard this story?
I mean, I think the first thing I would like them to do is look at all children and all people as equally important to one another. And I think sometimes when people view the homeless, or people view children of color, or people view children who are in lower socioeconomic class, they somehow view them as maybe not on an equal playing field or equal. And so sometimes when they see children in foster care and bad things are happening to them, or you see children in certain neighborhoods and bad things are happening to them, they feel like, well, you know, they just don't care about it as much. And first off, all people are equal. All people have worth under God, and that's my belief. And especially children. All children deserve to be loved, and all children deserve to be cared for. So when you are in a community and, like, you know, you have your own children, we still have an obligation to the community and other people's children too. That means looking out for them. That means making sure that they're safe. That means helping them if they need help. That means calling the hotline if you see potential child abuse. Don't be scared to do it. Don't feel like you're going to somehow offend the parent, which happens so many times. We're so afraid to offend the parent that we don't look out for the child. And so you can call the hotline. You can say something. If you see somebody hurting a child, you should say something. Children are very vulnerable, and they look up to parents and adults. And so I hope that's one thing that people see is so many people had a chance to save Gabriel. So many people, and they were all adults, and nobody stepped up. Nobody. And how does that happen? And I think part of it is people see children of color or children in lower socioeconomic class, and they just don't care. They really just don't care. And I think that we need to care. So that's one thing I would say. Another thing I would say is, you know, get involved. Like what's going on now, vote. You know, laws are created by people. You know, these entities are the products of us. And so I always tell people, the police department is the product of racism. It didn't create racism. And so we have to vote. We have to make change. And to do that is you have to get involved in the process. And so people have to do that. They have to get involved and try to get laws changed to help and protect children. Volunteer. I think that's always important. You need to volunteer for many organizations that are trying to help children. That's really, really important. And then, you know, become certain things, certain jobs. You know, become a teacher, become a prosecutor, become a defense attorney, become a documentary producer. We need good people in all these fields. Become a police officer, work in special victims. We need good people and caring people in all these fields, because those are individuals that could have made a difference in Gabriel's life. And I think what I tell people, especially social workers, do not become a social worker for the money. Become a social worker because you care about children and you want to help. Do not become a prosecutor or a police officer for the money. Do it because you care and you want to help. And so I think that's another thing I try to tell people is, you know, try to get into a profession that you really want to be in. I consider myself lucky that I believe I'm doing something that I'm supposed to be doing. And so I think people getting in those fields, I think, is another important thing, getting out there and getting yourself involved and trying to help. But I think the biggest thing to say is everybody has to treat each other equally. You know, and I will leave it with this. I never called Isauro Aguirre a name or belittled him. He still was a person. I do feel that he's wholly responsible for what happened, but he's still a person. And so we are still all people. and we all have to treat each other as people. I think what he committed was horrible, but those are his actions, but he's still a person. And so when I hear a lot of politicians call people names and use derogatory names for people, it saddens me. And so I hope that people view everybody as equal, including children, and will fight for all children.
Thank you.
Well put. Yes.
Like I said, what you see is what you get. I mean,
No, it's good.
I say what Brian knows. Like, if you ask me a question, I'm going to answer your question to the best of my abilities.
This is
So
great. Couldn't ask for better. Yeah. You want me to just intro?
Yes, I'm so sorry. We live in this city and we have to park our car in a new spot every time, and my
Right.
has to pick up our child, and he's trying to find out where I put our car.
That's important.
And he didn't want to come in and stop the recording. Okay, should be good. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing, Brian, where I'm going to spotlight your recording. And then what I'll ask you to do is, there we go. Oh, you're still there. Okay. Is to give us a little bit of introduction and background to who you are.
Okay, so my name is Brian Knappenberger. I've been making documentary films now for 20 plus years, which is amazing to me because I don't actually feel that old. You know, I've worked for National Geographic Discovery. I've worked for PBS Frontline. You know, a lot of my work has to do with the kind of intersection between technology and human rights and civil liberties. You know, issues of abuses of power, and that sort of thing. The kind of classic line, afflicting the comfortable and comforting the afflicted. So, you know, I've been making films for quite a while. I first came across this story when it broke in the LA Times from a writer named Garrett Thuroff. Garrett Thuroff, through mutual friends, has said, and another producer we know, said, you really have to look at this story. And I was immediately engaged in it. I thought it was a really important story. I thought it was I thought it was unbelievable, to be honest. I was so moved by it. But I actually didn't think I was the one to do it. I wasn't sure that I was the right fit for it. I wasn't sure. But the more I kind of learned about what happened to Gabriel, I got more and more drawn in, and I guess emotionally kind of engaged in it. Really wanted to see Gabriel's story told the way I thought it should be told. So we started filming. We got permission, as John said, we got permission from Judge George Lamelli to go into the courtroom, which is unusual. That's up to, as I understand it, up to the discretion of the judge. Sometimes judges a lot of judges don't do that. A lot of times there's a single pool camera. We said, look, we're doing something that's much deeper than the local news that would typically draw from the pool camera. We're doing something that's really going into this story, and we're very lucky. Judge George Lamelli let us in to the courtroom and just kind of threw open the doors. He's, I think, a very forward-thinking judge in that sense. And so we started hearing it, and we started hearing John in the very early days. I think, you know, it's a death penalty case. I don't think we were filming the jurors, but you know, they're picking the jurors, and I personally went into the courtroom and stuff, and I thought, oh, we got to get this prosecutor. We would really love to interview this guy. So Eve, our co-producer, Eve Marson, I think, approached him, and I think we were all crossing our fingers behind our back that he would talk to us. And then he just really was very honest about this fight that he was in. I think to find out the truth of what happened here, wherever it led. So that's when this all started, and it really was the beginning of 2 years of labor of love project that meant a lot to everybody. I mean, I think of all the crew that worked on this, editors and other producers and everybody involved that makes a film that you see in the credits. I think almost to a person they'd say this is one of the most powerful things that they've ever worked on, and most important stories they've ever worked So we were humbled to be along for the ride, and we felt a big responsibility to get it right.
Can you speak maybe just a little bit more to how Justin being open to speaking with you, like maybe changed the course of the story that you were telling, or the fact that this case seems so shrouded in secrecy, and in the fact that the systems of power were retracting to maintain their own power, and that what he was doing was the opposite of that. And
yeah. Well, look, it's rare within any government structure of any sort for people to step outside the kind of program line. When that happens, it's usually something really important, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. And so yeah, we were very glad that Jon stepped forward, but you know, it was beyond just the letting us see into what was happening with the case. It was also, you know, he has his personal story. He shared his personal story with us. He pointed us in a lot of directions that were, I thought, helpful in us understanding the system generally, how it works. A lot of times it's very hard to just even understand how it works. I mean, LA has a slightly unusual system with the board of supervisors and the way LA County works. LA County is huge, bigger than some states, most states, I think. It's a huge bureaucracy, and DCFS is a big part of that. So just untangling how the structure works was tricky. Garrett Throff, the reporter who's been covering this for years, is really good at that too. So it was. Yeah, I mean, it was. I think once we were kind of, people understood that we were in the courtroom, where we're showing up every day. We were asking everybody that you know, involved to interview with us. I think people started understanding, like, oh, they're serious about this, and then more and more people talked to us, and I think most people talked to us in the end, except for DCFS and the board of supervisors and stuff. They were resistant to that, and I think that's really a problem, I think, for the public and people in LA. I think people in LA deserve a little more transparency, especially in a case that's this big and this important, in which and by the way, and Jon was involved with there was a rapid series of cases in rapid succession that happened in the summer when we were still editing this case. So while we were making this case, there were other cases, Noel Quattro and others, in which Mr. Hatami was also engaged. So we were the relevance of this was constantly being reinforced while we were making it.
I muted myself. And then I was wondering if you could just give me a quick throw to the trailer that'll be cut in as part of the actual gala.
Right. Just want to say this is how.
Yeah.
Now stay tuned for that. Yeah. So the response to the trailer was amazing. We understood. First of all, I will say that because of the seriousness of this and how intense the crime was, we weren't 100% sure that a lot of people would even watch this, to be honest. And we were very cognizant of that. And I just sort of put that out of my mind early on and said, look, we're just going to tell the story the way it needs to be told. And if people watch it, they watch it. But a lot of people would say, oh, it sounds important, but I don't know if I can watch that. Well, it was #1 on Netflix for 2 weeks across all genres. I mean, across everything. I think it took a $90 million Mark Wahlberg movie to knock us out on #1. The response was overwhelming. People all over the world were watching this. Really phenomenal response. Surprised everybody, including everybody at Netflix. So the response was huge. But we saw that in the trailer early on, and where people just immediately were sharing it and talking about it. That was a long-winded toss to a trailer.
And then let's imagine that we're coming back to you after the trailer has aired. And so now that people have seen the trailer and they've gotten more background from everybody about this story, what is it that you would want them to take away from the work that you've put into this, to the work that Jon Hatami has put into this? How do they carry Gabriel's voice forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think John said it really, really well. You know, children have rights. We don't see that as a society. I don't know why we haven't gotten our head around this sense that children are you know, that they have the same right to protection, and they have a right to a safe environment, and that they have that we look at them as somehow less than adults, and that just needs to change. So he said it better than I did, but that's really central to this whole project. That and the courage of people who see wrongdoing to come forward. There's a number of people like that in this documentary. Arturo Miranda is one, the security guard at the Gain office, who came forward. And you know, you hear people over and over again say, in the case of Gabriel, that we saw something but we weren't sure, and so we didn't do anything. That happened a lot in the hearings with the caseworkers and some of their interviews. But Arturo Miranda saw Gabriel for 10 minutes, and he just made it his mission to try to do something about it. It just kind of stands in the face of all these other people, all these other adults that just really chose to look the other way. It's not that they didn't see it; they chose to define in their own minds that it wasn't a problem. And you know, Arturo Miranda's case says that better than anybody. So, I mean, courage of people to do the right thing. John's right. It's if you don't necessarily want to speak up, you don't want to offend somebody, you don't want to do, but it, you know, if you see something happening or if there's a problem, you know, you have to do something about it. You have to step forward, and that includes people within government institutions, and within any institution that has power over somebody, other people.
I think that's a great answer.
I'm just taking these in whatever direction. I don't even I can't remember the question.
I think that's great.
You can tell we're all passionate about it, so we'll you know, you hit a nerve with some of these stuff. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Erica. I think we've got a lot of good material. I mean,
so, yes.
Two amazingly articulate individuals. Guys, while we were talking, three of the people from my staff said, "Wow, those guys know how to talk." So,
he's a prosecutor. He's a lawyer, and I'm a documentary filmmaker. So yeah. Yeah.
So I guess we'll look for more prosecutors and documentary makers, or what was wrong with what I was saying. But anyway, so I want to thank you both. We will be honoring you on the 22nd, and I'm sure Jill will be back with some other requests. But for now, thank you for taking the time today. Really.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all the work you do too.
Thanks. Take care.
See you, Brian.
I'll see you.